Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. 50 years old. When you finally get to that point, you finally begin to feel sometimes a slight little agitation within yourself that says, have I really lived life on my own terms? Most of us might answer that question by simply thinking, no, I've been doing pretty much everything the way my parents taught me was the right way to do it, the way society has shaped me to believe I've been going in the right direction, but yet I feel very unfulfilled. Well, when you consider those particular options that you followed along with, in other words, the herd mentality, you might consider the fact that, well, perhaps you've just been kind of going in a daze or into a dream that just isn't really working for you. What would it be like if you could just simply wake up and realize that the life that you're living could be that lucid dream that has been eluding you for so very, very long in the dream worlds? Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is an internationally respected authority on world spirituality. We're going to learn about 8 powerful insights that will show us that life is like a dream and that the dreamer is the person that can actually create that kind of reality. He offers a radical new way of looking at the present moment so that the experience of spiritual awakening can occur. He describes spiritual awakening as similar to the experience of lucid dreaming, except now while in the waking state. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest and author of the book Lucid Living, Experiencing Your Life Like a Lucid Dream, our guest, Tim Freke. Tim, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
It's a real pleasure, Daniel. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. Now, I understand that the first time you awoke was when you were at the age of 12. Tell us about that.
Yes, it started very young for me. I grew up in the southwest of England, where I still live, and I think as a child, life seemed profoundly mysterious. I didn't understand why all the adults seemed to be going around in a kind of daze, like you just said, or a dream, or kind of a numbness in which they seem to be ignoring this monumental mystery that we exist, that this moment's happening, that we're on this incredible journey from birth to death, and in this infinite universe of such extremes of beauty and cruelty and everything you can possibly imagine in between. And as a youngster, with that innocent eyes of a child, it really struck me, why are they all ignoring this and going around as if they know what life is, when it struck me that really they didn't know what life is. And I used to sit on this hill overlooking my little sleepy town that I grew up in and just think about these things, and one day something happened. And I was about 12 years old, and I now look back and I think and realize that was the first time that I experienced this lucid living, or being deep awake is another name I give it, where you just move into this ultra-conscious, completely different way of experiencing reality. And my life has been really just dominated by exploring what that is ever since, and writing lots and lots of books about it, and talking to people all over the world about it, and going deeper into it myself, and sharing it, because I find it changes everything. It's a very profound shift in consciousness.
Now, it's really interesting because I know that you have a chapter in here, You Are Not a Person, and I was kind of wondering, now let's talk about that for a little bit. Now, here's what's really interesting. I want to go ahead and share a story with you, and I'm trying to remember, I believe it was the summer of my 3rd grade year. I don't know what age I would be at that time. I guess we could do the math, but that's not important. But anyway, in Southern California, Los Angeles, they had a wonderful summer school program, which for a lot of people, summer school, but it was actually more of a place to go, and it gave kids something to go and do, And there was this one particular teacher that we would go to class, and we would see old movies like Hunchback of Notre Dame or Hound of the Baskervilles, things like that. And he was really also fantastic about telling stories. And for some reason, as we were watching one of the films that he liked showing us, I actually had that kind of insight. I don't know if it would be similar to yours, but then somehow that I was in my own head and that I was actually watching a movie of my life unfold, preparing me for the time that I would be born into this world and be ready for it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and it's fascinating. I mean, I find all of these types of experience absolutely fascinating because they're the things which really stand out in people's lives. You know, for me, that particular line, well, maybe I can just fill in just very quickly the gap between the 12-year-old and now, which is really, I had this experience. It's an experience which I suspect many people have tasted in various forms. For me, the defining characteristics, and could describe it in so many ways, but the thing which really stands out for me is this profound sense of oneness, that everything is connected, and that I am connected, if not I am everything, and this love which arises from that sense of oneness. For me, as a 12-year-old, the thing I remember the most was this incredible feeling of the universe pulsating with love and feeling such relief and crying and just this like coming home. Like, oh my God, I know this place. This is where I should be. And that had a huge effect on me, set me off on this crazy journey which has been my life of just doing every mad thing I could to expand consciousness. And at the end of it, I found myself, over the last 20 years or more, from all my studies, writing books on just about all of the spiritual traditions of the world, showing that at their heart, you know, on the surface they're all different, very, but go underneath and you find they're coming from human beings in different places in the world at different times in history who have had the same experience of waking up. Mm-hmm. And the common characteristic is they come to life, there's this profound oneness, and there's this all-embracing love. And that from that point on, they just want to go there and take other people to that realization. And what I did after writing lots of these books and kind of, we had one of them was a very big bestseller, and that kind of catapulted things into a different area for me. I felt like what I needed to do was kind of stop writing about spiritual traditions and actually come back to my own actual experience and go, how can I convey this to other people as it really is, without talking about nirvana, without talking about Brahman, without using odd Tao, or just in my own experience, in such a way that they could get it in their own experience. And the way that I was able to do that, I feel, and why Lucid Living is a hugely important book for me, was this analogy which you mentioned at the top of going, oh, look, this awakened state, which people have been talking about forever, is comparable to lucid dreaming, except it's now. And that's why I call it lucid living. Mm-hmm. And what that simple, I mean, there's a huge amount we could go into about that, but to go back to your original point about you are not a person and your experience, one of the great teachings at the very heart of all the mystical traditions of the world sounds really strange, because the teaching is that you have a deeper self, spirit, different words, Atman, Buddha nature, loads of different names. And it has no form. Now that just sounds incomprehensible, to be told your essence has no form. But once you use this simple analogy, which many, many people have used throughout history, not just me, of life being like a dream, you can suddenly start to understand what it means in a very easy way. Because if I say to you, in a dream, you have two natures. One has a form and one doesn't. It becomes, you can get that, because in the dream you have a form. In your dream, you appear to be a person. You live out an adventure in your dream. It seems very compelling. It often shows you things about yourself. But there's a deeper aspect to who you are. And the deeper aspect of who you are is the dreamer. And the dreamer has no form, or it's all forms. The dreamer isn't in the dream. The dream is in the dreamer. And this is the essence of this very deep mystical message about awakening, which, as I say, whether you go to the Sufis or the Zen masters or the Tibetan Buddhists, it doesn't matter. The Gnostic Christians, same message, because it's a very real experience. And what I guess I'm doing is going, and you know what? We can all have it. It's not just for the special people. It's open to anyone.
Tim, it's really interesting how often I have slight arguments sometimes by people who seem to be very ironclad in their religious beliefs. That idea that if I do or I live a perfect way here on this life, that it prepares me for the afterlife and the kingdom of God in some cases. And I think to myself, well, don't you think that's kind of a waste of energy? Really, I mean, when you think of how full life can truly be, I would think if God was creating us in the image of God, well, God is supposed to be a creator, which makes us co-creators. Geez, it would be kind of amazing if we actually followed that simple idea.
Well, the philosophy which is underlying lucid living, and indeed all my books, is a philosophy, again, which you find in various forms preceding it in all these different mystical traditions, which could be put like this, that when you discover the dreamer, when you actually go deep enough into your own essential nature, your own deep nature, there's one of us. There's one dreamer dreaming the dream of life and meeting itself in all these different forms. And if you were going to use theological language, which of course in the past was very popular, then very often that one dreamer has been called God. So in that sense, what the mystical understanding of, say, the Hebrew tradition, that you are made, not in the image of God, but that you are an image arising within God. You are a form arising within this vast, formless creativity, which is what we all really are, at the depths. And then what makes me, and you, is that I'm the great creativity appearing as Tim, and you're the creativity appearing as Daniel, and we get to meet. Now, if we meet just on the surface, we're completely separate. You're you in a different country. I'm me. I come from England, all of that. But if we see through to our depths, there's one of us. And when we see that oneness in the depths, that's when the lucid living kicks in. That's when we wake up and there's this oneness and this incredible love.
Now, when people tend to try to approach this, do they find themselves confused at first and coming to a point where, boy, this is kind of slippery? It's like, for instance, you were talking about how if we can awaken to this conscious life, not one where we're asleep and we have the dreams, where we most of the time become passive yet active observers. The true lucid dreamer is the one that engages in the process and actually begins controlling the outcome for the most part of what dreams are. And the beauty of that is I've had a lot of experience with that. And it would be fascinating to really apply this, in a conscious living world. However, I think what a lot of people have as a barrier is fear. What has been your experience as you've been around the world with these people and what they share with you?
Well, Daniel, honestly, my experience is that people are really ready to wake up. Now, I don't know if that's because that's the people I meet, although I meet all sorts, all ages, all nationalities, literally from Japan, Mexico, Europe, anywhere, America. What I find is that we're ready if I can point to it in the right way, and I guess the thing about fear is important. If I can create a safe space where people can feel it's okay to explore, this state arises very naturally. It's one of the lines which I like to use, which I find very powerful, is that every heart assured of safety opens instantly. Every heart assured of safety opens instantly, and that's what I found. So if I create a safe space, and I can be clear enough. You see, a lot of spirituality, I'm a philosopher, so I really like to be clear. And why I'm so proud of the book Lucid Living is it's so short and it's so clear. So I think anyone reading that would get the message. And if they look carefully enough, begin to enter the experience. Of course, what I can do when I'm with people hands-on, when we're actually physically together, is that I can really go, look, here's things you can do that will take you into that state. And I run these events called the Deep Awakening over a weekend. And I would say the vast majority of people come directly experience for themselves the oneness and the big love, and not in some kind of abstract, I kind of get it way, in a way that you feel it right in your body. You can't miss it. It's such a powerful experience, and it's their own experience, and they find it for themselves. It's not my experience. It doesn't come from me. It comes from within them themselves, and they know that, so they can take it with them.
So how does a person know when they're beginning to actually live that process? Well,
I think when you're beginning to, there's a kind of sense of the mystery of life. The first step in the Lucid Living book, the first of the 8 insights that you mentioned, is simply life is a mystery. Because the biggest sign that we're asleep is we think we know what's going on. And we don't. I mean, we really don't. Nobody does. We're right now, this very moment that you and I are talking in, is the most breathtaking mystery. And, when I was younger, I worked with people who were dying. And I just saw so many of us don't notice the mystery until we're dying. And then suddenly we wake up. Suddenly we wake up and go, oh my God, what is this I'm in? That's just about to end. And I suppose the first thing, to get going is just to go, look, right now. And I'm saying this hoping that people who are with us listening will step into the mystery with me now and just notice this moment is the most breathtaking mystery. You just put down everything you think you know, and there it is, like this, oh my goodness, what is happening right now? And that's a doorway. One of my other books is called The Mystery Experience, because the mystery is a doorway which takes you into this process of living lucidly. And then as you go through, like I said, the real telltale sign that you are getting what this is this profound connection with oneness. And this, what arises from it, the most important thing for me, is this all-embracing love, this connection. And then from that, like you said, engagement, that you're not off somewhere else. You're not avoiding life. You're not preparing for something that's going to happen after death. You're right here, right now, engaged with the magic that's happening right in front of you in the moment.
Now, it's interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, I think sometimes people don't let go in a way to experience a lucid life because of, I think, fear gets in the way. Have you found that to be an obstacle?
Yeah, I should come back to that. I'm glad you brought me back to that, Daniel, because you mentioned that, and I kind of didn't address it head on. Went off on it. And
it was interesting, and the reason is, Tim, is because really what I'm trying to do is, in a parallel way for the listeners, kind of bridge, the dream world, the lucid world, and then the real world. And the reason is, okay, like for instance, just think of yourself when you've had that dream that you've got to run away from the bad guy, I don't know, or the boogeyman, whatever you want to call it. You find yourself, there's a little bitty hill. It's not even a big hill normally. I mean, maybe 3 or 4 feet in length. But you find yourself finding it impossible to get up that little hill. Or you just can't seem to get away from whoever that is that's chasing you. To me, that's a fear. But yet, bring that into a reality like, let's say you're awake, you go to work, you feel that you've been kind of, you need more money, you deserve more money, and you want to go and ask the boss for a raise, but you just don't do it because you're afraid of the outcome. There's no difference between those two worlds in that context.
So the first thing I want to say might sound a bit confrontational, or not confrontational, that's not right. It might sound a bit controversial. But hear me out, because the first thing I want to say is, it feels to me from my experience of ordinary life, the lives we lead, being fearful is a perfectly rational thing. When I hear people say, oh, I'm so spiritual now, I have no fear, I just feel like, well, you haven't been paying attention, because life is terrifying. And that's the truth. We know it is. Bad things happen to good people all the time. That's the reality we live in, as well, of course, wonderful things, but bad things too. So it feels to me, look, that's not going anywhere. The nature of life is that it's good and bad. It's day and night. It's up and down. It's beauty and cruelty. All the polarities. That's the nature of life. The thing is this. This waking up takes you to a place which is safe. So that life stays what it is, which is one day one thing, one day another. But you find inside of yourself a completely safe space. Utterly safe. In the same way that when you're dreaming at night, even if you were having your worst nightmare, if you woke up in the dream and dreamed lucidly, you'd know that even though if the nightmare continued, you'd know it was a nightmare and you were okay. Because there's a deeper part of you which isn't in the dream. And that's what comes with this awakening. There's this profound safety. And from that comes courage. Because the difficult things, the scary things don't go away in life. But what can come as well is the courage to face them. And that courage comes from a deep sense that despite everything, I'm safe. Underneath the surface, The surface may be storms blowing, but at the depths, there's a stillness and there's a safety, which means I can live my life, and then one day it's a storm, and another day it's a beautiful sunny day. And there's something I can root myself in, which is safe when whatever. Does that make sense?
It does. Now, let me give you an idea. I'm going to go ahead and share a dream that I found interesting that kind of stuck with me over the years. So there I am, and I'm trying to get away what seems to be phantoms, and there's 2 or 3 of them, I guess. And so, in this dream where I am, I'm in places like, there's the jungle bars on the playground trying to find ways to be elusive in that situation there. And each time I took many steps or ran or jumped or whatever it was, it seems like just like a bungee cord, these things were attached to me, and they would kind of immediately be right there behind me, okay? And so I kept doing this, and I started noticing that was happening. Call it the bungee or the rubber band effect. As you pull, you get the tension, and then boom, they're right there. So it's like you just can't seem to get away. Now, what was interesting is as I became aware of that, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to run from these guys anymore, and let's see what happens. And when I stopped, it's sort of like they stopped and kind of looked around with this look that said to them, well, what do we do next? He's not running, so we're not chasing him, so what do we do next? And I found that interesting because we find ourselves in a waking world a lot of times doing that very same thing, running away from things or trying to avoid or be elusive with things that, that we really don't need to be running from. And here I think that dream was telling me that, and that's what's really interesting about the whole process.
It's a basic technique, and I don't know, it sounded like you were lucid in that dream, Daniel, but it's a basic technique of lucid dreaming that when you get attacked by monsters, you just stay lucid and welcome them in, and they're transformed. I think you can take that and apply it to lucid living, which is the same. Once you live lucidly and you're rooted in this spacious presence of your deep being, when you're in that big safety, that love, you can actually go, come on then, and then face those things which would otherwise terrify you. And I mean the mere fact that I'm traveling the world talking to people is about that for me, that I can do the things that I do because there's a place where it feels like, well, it's okay. Even if it all goes horribly wrong and I made a complete fool of myself, hey, I'm over 50, I know I'm a fool. I've seen that. I've seen enough. I can have the courage to be myself, because there's this deep safety. So going back to that line about you're not a person, outside the dream you're not a person, inside the dream of course you are. By knowing this depth of the dreamer, I can be the person Tim more. So Tim can engage with his life and go for it, really live, really take the risk of living this particular person, being me, with all of the good and bad that comes with. Because the more I wake up to being outside the dream, the more I can come and engage inside the dream.
Now, as people become more lucid in their living, do you think that they are, let's say, learning the lessons and growing a lot faster as a result?
Yes, undoubtedly. Because the thing, I'm sure we all know this, the thing which, when you're just in your habitual mind, when you're not really awake, then you can go through things for years before you step onwards. The more conscious we become, the quicker that process goes, so that you really start feeling like, life becomes exciting because you're really moving. It doesn't mean that life's always easy. I wouldn't want to give that impression for 1 minute. And I don't personally, think there's arriving. I don't think, it's not like you get lucid living and you get the badge and the hat and you've done it. It feels like, I feel like a total beginner all the time. Like I'm learning all the time, new. And that feels more like what the process is. One of constantly learning something new rather than having got to the end of the process.
Now, here's one, because we've heard so much about it, let's say, in the last 10 years. And I remember when we started the radio program, it wasn't too long after that movies like The Secret or What the Bleep Do We Know were appearing, and people were beginning to think, I kind of like what they're talking about here about physics, and For some people, it might be a situation they realize, I could just sit down and intend what I want all day long and not take any action, and it will just come to me. Well, if you think life is long enough to live that way, then by all means go for it. But here's what's really interesting, and I like that chapter in your book, The World Exists in You, and the reason I brought this up, about those movies is that you also heard about, there's this law of attraction. Okay, well,
Yep.
geez, if it's a law, then it's unbreakable. Well, if that's true, and, but what you see is, and it was funny when I began to glimpse and then I began to know how true the statement of the law of attraction is that you attract everything into your life. And there are a lot of things that we attract into our lives that we really don't believe we want. But in fact, if you really followed what these things were talking about in these movies, there's so much reality that, if you really want to go and let's say you want to become that millionaire, you're going to attract in your life all the beliefs that you have surrounding money and what it is to be wealthy in the forms of people and experiences. Now, God forbid, should you get that $5,000 bill from the Internal Revenue Service that says that you're behind in your taxes, and you'd better pay it at the rate of 25% interest if you don't. But that's one of those things you attracted.
Well, I would have to say, let me say this, as a philosopher, which is how I approach things, the law of attraction troubles me. I don't mean it troubles me emotionally, I mean it troubles me intellectually. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't meet my experience, and it doesn't really make sense. I'm not really sure the law analogy is a good one. I'm not sure the law analogy is a good one in science, let alone in metaphysics, and it seems confused, and it has numbers of unwanted, for me, things about it that you end up believing things which you implicitly are in it that you really don't want to believe because they're not very nice. However, I have no doubt whatsoever that the reason it's so popular is because the experience of feeling a relationship between one's intentions and what happens is a reality. And I've had such huge examples of that in my life, I can't possibly doubt that, and with many people I know. The magic doesn't always work. In fact, mostly it doesn't, I would say. But sometimes it does, and when it does work, it can be so dramatic you can't miss it. Huge things manifest, as they say, to use the language. So you see the dreamlike nature of life like that. I think one of the key things for me to make clear, for people who are listening, Daniel, is that when I say life is like a dream, I'm not saying, like many in the law of attraction community are saying, that you individually are creating this. I don't think that makes sense. I don't think it can hold up to scrutiny. So this is what I'm experiencing right here is not Tim's dream. It's the opposite. It's the dream of Tim. This is, the dreamer is dreaming Tim. Tim isn't dreaming this any more than in a dream. The person I seem to be in the dream is the dreamer. The person in the dream is being dreamt. Tim is being dreamt. Tim is not the source of this. Tim is the expression of this. When I go to my deeper nature, which is before Tim, that's when you find something which is dreaming this, and that is not Tim, it is Tim, but it's much, much more than that, much, much more, and it's much more impersonal than Tim. So it ceases to be Tim trying to fulfill his particular intentions or manipulate reality to fit his will, or all those things which comes from the law of attraction, and it avoids the problems in the law of attraction. Like a simple analogy would be, you've got 6 athletes running a race. They're all practicing the law of attraction. They've all imagined they're going to win, but only one of them will, and that's going to happen no matter how good they get, because only one person wins the race. So my feeling is we need to think about that stuff a bit deeper. But what this can help with is understanding how life can be so magical. And whilst it doesn't mean we can control it, it does mean we can enter into it and appreciate it.
I really appreciate that you said that, because what was coming to mind as you were discussing this, and I wanted to bring in the law of attraction, and you hear about the power of intention, and to me, I think sometimes the messages with those, what I was hearing, and this is just, my opinion, after all, somebody's dreaming me to be maybe scrutinizing about this, but the thing that I was getting from those was, we have shown you a way toward certainty in life. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's just not possible, okay?
That's right.
We
That's
have
right.
shown you a way that could possibly eliminate pain in your life, you know, and I think that's what these clear messages coming to people are. Now, let's go ahead and throw an astronomer and an astrophysicist into the mix here. If you really believe that with the law of attraction or the power of intention, that these things, through enough practice, dedication, and commitment, is going to give you that life of certainty, why don't you go talk to an astrophysicist about galaxies in the universe, and you'll realize that there's a lot of randomness going on there.
Yeah.
That's the way the universe just is. The question is, as you've heard one of the ancient ways of dealing with this, the question is, how are you going to relate with or deal with these things as they occur? Because there is no certainty.
Again, I come back to the number one point that the Lucid Living book starts off with. Life is a mystery. So for me, that's a place where we need to root ourselves. And the great thing about that is it's a place of deep humility, because you don't know. And then, from that place, we can share how it seems to us. Like you said, well, it looks like this to me. Is that useful to you? So that there's no fake authority. I don't have to stand here and go, look, I'm a special person. I'm called something special, and I'm telling you because I have the knowledge. I know this. Or I don't have to tell you that somebody who hasn't got a body is telling me, and I'm telling you because I'm a chap, or any of that. There's a deep humility in just going, we don't know. Root in that, and there we're all equal. Every one of us is equal. And then from that place, let's share our experience, let's share our wisdom, and then my hope as a philosopher and a writer is that I've spent my life exploring this lucid living, being deep awake, and I hope it will be of value to other people, and I'm just delighted when it is. And I can give it to somebody else, and then they've got it too. And that feels like that feels like the essence of what spirituality is about for me. That's what it should be about. And that's a relationship of love.
I got into this marvelous conversation one time with my wife, and we were talking about reality at one particular time, and I said, I'm finding it interesting as I get to talk with marvelous people just like yourself and share ideas and also pass those on to the listeners, ways of looking at things and experiencing life. And I said, I think desires are necessary because that could be what the dreamer is intending for our experience.
Yes.
Now, and thinking about that, and certainly I want you to fill in the blanks here, but all of us have different desires, different ways of living, but yet we live in this world that would broadcast, well, you want to be like the Kardashians, or you want to be like this. I mean, we're really in a celebrity-driven society now that kind of shows us that we're supposed to be under the belief that if we can't live up to the image of what these people are creating, that somehow we've done something wrong. And I say, if you can erase that and forget about that, maybe just turn the television off for a while and focus on what are your desires, that the dreamer has given you specific, special desires, not only that, but the talent to carry these desires out in such a way that you can fully express yourself unlike nobody else you know.
Yes.
And now, if you can get out of your own way, and I'll give it a wonderful example. Back when I was in junior high school, the movie Saturday Night Fever came out, and I caught the bug. I wanted to do that. I just did. So what did I do? I started throwing the records on and watching dance moves and going for it. And pretty soon I had friends that said, I'd really like to learn how to dance like you. You're pretty exciting to watch, And I was, okay, well, come on over, and I'll show you some moves and we'll do our thing. The next thing, I'm being pulled out of the classroom, and usually when I'm pulled out of the classroom it's to go see the principal because I screwed up. But this time I was meeting with a producer who produced a play where I was the lead in it because of my dancing ability. The next thing I'm performing at colleges. Now, mind you, these weren't my intentions. My only intention is I just wanted to dance, but it was something I loved doing. That's what I mean when you follow a desire and you get out of your own way and allow yourself to just enjoy it. It's pretty amazing how life really unfolds itself to allow you to say, how far would you really like to go with this?
Yeah, that to me, that is the place where this waking up is pointing to exactly that. It's for me, when people used to come to me years ago, my main mission, I felt, was to try and wake them up to oneness, wake them up out of the dream. Now I'm much more ambitious. Now it feels like the place I want to end up is I want to do that, but then I want to go further. And this is in Lucid Living. This is where it goes to at the end, which, the last insight in the book is, you are the one. And I love that line because it's got two meanings. There's the one sense in which, it's all one, and you're that. You are God, if you will. You are the oneness of all things. And that's true. And it's expressing itself uniquely as Tim and Daniel and everybody else. So each one of us is the one in our life. And one of the great paradoxes that I love is that I can look at my life, and if I look at it in one way, I can go, well, look, Tim is one amongst 7 billion people in a universe 13.5 billion years old with 200 billion galaxies. He's a piece of dust. He's nothing. And that's true. Humbling and true. But also, in my experience, in this dream, Tim's the star. He's in every scene of this movie. This is the Tim movie. And, Daniel's just come in now, but Tim's always in it. And Tim will be in it when Daniel goes. And, and his wife is the romantic interest, and his best mate is comic sidekick, and it's the adventure of Tim. What will happen to Tim next? And that's true of each one of us. Each one of us is the star of the show in our own dream, in our own movie, in our own life. And then it becomes like, well, make it your own then. Really go for that. Dare to really engage with being the one. You're the one that can transform your life. You're the one that can bring something unique to this adventure. The Romans called the deep self, their word for the deep self was the genius, which of course we now use in a different context. But it's got that lovely reflection. It's like, find your genius. What's your genius? What's that thing in you? It doesn't mean you've got to be like Albert Einstein or Pablo Picasso. Your genius may be kindness. Maybe just being present with somebody who needs you. It can be anything. But you find that genius, that deep self within you, and then it comes through you uniquely, like you said. And then you find your own. You can realize the deepest potential within yourself. And that feels to me the deepest meaning there is to our lives. To wake up, and then from that place to fulfill the deepest potential within us as an individual.
Very exciting stuff, and I was just reminded of, I think it was Denver Broncos quarterback, and I could be wrong. I don't really follow football, but this was John Elway back when he was playing. And I remember reading that there was a particular newscaster that was asking, how is it that you can smile and feel good after losing a game? And he says, because I know that I put 100% effort into the moment while I was playing the game. There are, a dozen other players on this team here that are just as responsible. Did they have the same commitment? Not that he was blaming his teammates. He was just simply saying, I did the best I knew I could do in the moment while we were playing the game. This is the outcome, so be it.
One of the things I love, Daniel, because as a philosopher, sometimes I get into very deep waters. But what I love is seeing the depth in the obvious. And I love playing when I'm with people. So, when we go on this adventure over a weekend with people, or I go and give a big talk or something, often we'll, explore lucid living and you're not a person and things which sound like, whoa, what's that? And we'll go on this whole journey. But where I like to end up is somewhere so simple and so obvious. And the line which is one of my favorite places to end is the one that you've just used, really, which is to say, you know what? The essence of this, the essence of applying this, is do your best. And every one of us knows that that's what we should do. We know it. We tell our kids it. We feel it. We know that when we do our best, it feels good, and when we don't, we feel like we've missed it. And there's what I love again about the line, do your best, which, my mum used to say to me and I used to think meant nothing. But now feels like it's actually a really deep thing to say, is it's got that forgiveness in it as well, because it feels like I can try to do my best, and then I will fall short. Of course I will. I'm only Tim. But I'll have known, hey, I did my best. And that double meaning of striving towards more and accepting when we don't reach it is a wonderful combination to enable us to fulfill our deep potentials.
I know there was an interesting scene that falls along the line of this from the hit television show Breaking Bad.
Uh-huh.
And Jesse was talking as he was in the group, and they're sharing, as he says, you know, I have this teacher in wood class, they had us all make a box. So I got done with my box, and I gave it to the teacher, and the teacher looked at it and looked back at me, and he says, so is this really the best you can do? You know, and it made him think, yeah, is this the best I could really do? So he finally applied himself and talked about how he made this beautiful wooden box and the different things he did, and he polished it down. And he says, and I was mesmerized at the end of it. And a lot of times I think people, when it comes to their desires, and I love this term that you use, I caught this on your website, hypnosis. We'll talk about that in just a minute here. But that we tend to be in a hypnotic state when it comes to outcomes.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about isn't the outcome, but it's actually really the journey, because that's what gets you there in the first place.
You know, you said earlier about celebrity culture and wanting to be like these celebrities or wanting vast wealth. And obviously that's increased because of the level of communication. The way it looks to me, though, Daniel, is that really all that is biology. It's like human beings have arisen through their biology. They've come through natural selection, all of that, to arrive at where we are now. And part of that is a kind of that herd or like a group of dogs. And you have alphas. You have an alpha male, you have an alpha female, and they compete and one of them wins, and off you go, and everyone aspires to be the alpha. And really, it feels like that's all it is. It's like, well, the alpha female is Kim Kardashian because she's got the looks and the money and the glamour, and the alpha male is the richest and most powerful guy, and we look to them and go, they're the alphas. But it's like, well, and that's one level. It's real. It's on its own level. But it's purely biological that's been socialized. But there's something much deeper which we can find. It's like, wake up from that. That's not interesting enough. That's just so superficial. That's just on this much more really animalistic level. Wake up to your deep spirit. Wake up to your soul. Wake up to these other aspects, and that's where you find, oh, really, what you want is nothing to do with any of that. There's something much deeper. It's not about being the alpha in the tribe or anything like that. It's about being yourself and bringing through your genius and fulfilling, which may be dancing like Saturday Night Fever, or writing the best book you possibly can, or learning how you can be more loving. I mean, that's, for me, at the end of the day, I aspire to be a good communicator and to write beautiful books, but my biggest aspiration is how can I be a more loving presence to everyone I meet? And that's a huge aspiration, which I succeed at sometimes and fail at others, but I'm learning. It's getting better, bit by bit.
Well, one thing you did say, Tim, earlier in the program, and I believe it's so true, is that, you're never going to master life.
It's too big. I mean, geez,
exactly.
my feeling with that is when people think they understand it, I just think, look, there is 200 billion galaxies.
Right.
Each one full of 100 billion stars. That's 1 trillion billion stars. Anyone, if you live to be 80, you'll have 4,000 weeks to sort this out. 1 billion trillion stars, 4,000 weeks. There's nothing more foolish than to think we know what this is, which is why, in my experience, those people who claim to are the most dangerous. The people who are blowing themselves up because for God, they think they know what this is. They're sure. They're so sure they're going to kill each other, themselves and other people, because they're so sure. And that's because they're furthest away from the truth, because the truth is mystery. The truth is we don't know. The truth is something we come face to face with when we let go of knowing. And our consciousness changes. That's when it comes in. So there's something so lovely, I think, about being able to meet in the mystery.
I just have to ask, because you've been out, you certainly do a lot of lectures and workshops. You've been with hundreds of thousands of people from around the world on this, and it's just a fascinating subject, because I think the biggest thing is when you look for that moment, we hear about living in the moment, as you try to do that, you realize that what you're talking about here is the idea that, life can be very elusive when you're going after it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but just don't have that power of intention too hard, because if you have the dreams, you're trying to get away from the bad guy, you realize it's a slippery slope. But the more you open your hands and you accept life, and then as we talked about earlier about following your desires, your bliss, you'll see these things unfold. That doesn't mean the bad things won't happen, but you'll also realize that in those bad things, there's also treasure there as well. But what my question is, that as people attend these workshops and they, really try to get to that place for the reason they're there, is what do you find to be common obstacles or snags for people who just, I guess, maybe have a hard time letting go?
Oh, this is not going to be very helpful on your radio program, I'm afraid, Daniel, but I generally don't find there are obstacles. Because the obstacles are what people think that the obstacle is what stops people coming. Once they get over that and come, any obstacles they think are there melt away very quickly. Now, not with everyone, of course, but with nearly everyone. Because what I do with people is I get people to wake up together. I'm not sitting up there dressed in white dispensing wisdom. We're waking up together. And when we wake up together, you feel the support of everyone. And at a certain place, you relax because you realize that you have this paradox to your nature, that on the one hand, you're this deep presence, which is universal, and on the other hand, you're a particular person. And everything is paradoxical. So the particular person you are is mixed, ambiguous. We all are. We're wonderful, but we've got bits in us which are difficult. We're learning. We're growing. So we're ambiguous. And then once you see that, there's a huge relaxation I see takes place. Because my aspiration, when people come to me, I'm not saying, look, I can teach you to be spiritually awake and then you'll be some uber being and it will always be perfect and you must, because that's when you do that, people just pretend. People try and pretend to be like that. What I do with people is go, look, we're both of these at once. So let's be ourselves. I'm going to be God being Tim, you be God being you. Let's find that deep presence and then be these vulnerable, wounded human beings on a journey. And with that comes this profound relaxation. And then suddenly, those things which were hurdles, they're just not there. Now, that doesn't mean that everything's easy, of course, but it means that you can open up to this lucid living. You can open up to this love. And when that comes in, it just feels so different. So I feel like the hurdles are the things we think we've got there which stop us actually connecting. But once you get to an event like one of my deep awakenings or whatever it is you're drawn to, if it's a safe space, every heart assured of safety opens instantly. It just opens of itself, and you see that what you thought were hurdles and blockages really aren't there.
I had the wonderful opportunity some time ago to talk with Dr. Hugh Lin, and he's one that, as most people who may be familiar with his name, was the one behind the Hawaiian Ho'oponopono.
Well, I did a book, Daniel, many years ago when I said I wrote lots of books. Mm-hmm. I did a book called Shamanic Wisdom Keepers, and one of the people that I wrote that about was that gentleman. I did all of these different shamanic traditions and the Ho'oponopono tradition. He wasn't particularly well known then, and I had the chance to be with him to learn from him and write about him.
And what was interesting is, and you said this earlier, people tend to think that they shouldn't have any problems. But he says, but don't you ever notice that whenever you have a problem, you're right there? And you were talking about that earlier, about where the one constant thing in this dream is that I'm right there.
Yeah. And really, if you didn't have challenges, the game would be over.
It wouldn't be any fun either.
Well, really, wouldn't it? It's like, and I think for most of us, as soon as we get over the challenges in life, we set up a whole new look. I mean, built in, isn't it, the fabric of life? I mean, certainly if I look at my life, it's like the minute I'd mastered being a kid, I was an adult. The minute I'd begun to master sort of being an adult, I was a parent. The minute it's like everything just comes at you, just like, right, got that, now this. And through that, this huge, evolution takes place, doesn't it? And we grow and we change, and of course we get hurt along the way too, and we have to go back and pick up the pieces that are broken. But it's a hell of a journey. And my feeling is, look, let's not escape the journey. Let's find a place of safety where we can enter into it with love. Let's engage. Let's come out to come in.
Like I said, I have the wonderful opportunity to talk with people just like you and lots of others, and it's such a treasure because there'll be times at the end of the week that I just have to be left alone to really take all in everything that I've just learned and absorbed.
I bet you must be incredible to
it's
get
pretty exciting, but there was this one time that I really was going through a pretty rough spot in my life, and I finally found, I'm just going to settle into this. Before I'd be a nervous wreck, like a lot of people, maybe finding ways to shut in, leave me alone, I've got all these problems sort of thing, but I thought, I'm just going to walk and I'm going to step into these problems, and I'm going to feel the experience of what this really is, and I'm going to look at the reality of what's in front of me, what's here right now. And the first thing you begin discovering is that problems are not permanent, but then again, neither are the good times either. They all come and go, as we've been talking about.
Yep.
And if you can really come to not only know this, but it will change you. And anyway, and there was a particular guest that I was talking with, and I had the opportunity to read her book, and there was a point in there where she says, you will find that you will come to a point in your life where whether something is good or whether something is bad, either way, it's okay.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I knew that then. I didn't just understand it, but I knew that. I thought, and it just changed me, where this kind of sounds silly, not that we want to do this, but it's interesting, was I started looking forward to problems. Come on, bring on the next one. Let's see what's going to happen here. And I began saying, there really is a gift in that monster. Just like Carlos Castaneda in the teachings of Don Juan. You kill the nightmare and you ask for a gift. And I thought, wow, that's just really amazing. Not that I want to keep problems coming into my life, because I'd like to spend my energies on the fun things too, but there it was.
Isn't it so true? Isn't it so often in our lives we look back and our biggest wounds now contain our deepest wisdom? Once we've been through the process. But we have to go through the process. And we haven't had chances to be focusing on my book, Lucid Living, but my the other book, which is a much bigger book, is The Mystery Experience, which is a bigger philosophical book and very accessible too. It's not scary philosophy. And the essence of that is something I call paralogical thinking, which is really about the fact that everything is paradoxical. So everything is not this or that, but it's both this and that at the same time. And one of the things, in the dream, you've got that. Well, are you in the dream, or is the dream in you? You're both. As Tim, I'm in the dream. As the dream is in me. All of those paradoxes. Are we one or separate? Well, we're both. We're all one and we're all separate. It's not one or the other, it's both. And when you start seeing that can be applied to everything, like you were saying about desires. Oh, so there's a place where I'm Tim, where I have these desires, where I face these challenges, where things go up and down. And then there's a deep place where it's very still, it doesn't move, I'm always safe. It's the opposite, and they coexist. It's not one or the other. And getting that coexistence of these opposites, that's where you can go, oh, so for Tim it's good and bad. But that I am, that's great, that's good. There's a fundamental goodness to existence, because when I come back into that deep self, it's just good. And then for Tim, it's up and down, in and out, works out, doesn't work out, he makes a fool of himself, he doesn't, he does well, he does badly, all the things that make my journey transformatory, and which make it an evolution.
Well, as I was mentioning earlier, and it was a fun awakening, and this happened probably 15 years ago, I had a guest on the program who was a Harvard astronomer, astrophysicist, produces these beautiful books, has pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope as he's describing galaxies and stars. I mean, beautiful stuff. Magnificent Universe is certainly a book that I would recommend for people. I mean, just the photographs of this is just incredible. But in sitting there, I realized, as I was interviewing him, I thought, wow, what he's saying here really applies to us. And he says, let's take a look at a situation here. As we've been talking about, We live in the Milky Way galaxy. Now, according to him, this particular galaxy is known as a spiral galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most highly ordered of the galaxies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, that's great. So we live in this highly ordered galaxy, which means, as you were saying earlier, we're highly ordered people.
Mm-hmm.
But yet this galaxy exists in a space universe of chaos. And it was funny because later that night I went to his lecture where he was talking about this book and showing the photographs, and he started talking about galaxies. He says, here's one, this is the Milky Way, this is a spiral galaxy, this is an elliptical galaxy, this is a sombrero galaxy, and, describing what each one of these were. And then he says, now here is a photo, and this is what happens when galaxies collide. I thought, oh boy, wouldn't that be a reality you'd like to live in?
That's just too awesome to really get your head around.
So let's talk about lucid living. Let's just lay it. What is it exactly?
So lucid living is when you wake up to your deeper nature, which is the dreamer, which is not in this. When you see that the thing which is experiencing this flow of experience you're having now, that's the dream. There's a flow of experience being experienced right now. There's colors, there's feelings, there's thoughts, there's shapes and sounds. There's a flow of experience, and then there's something experiencing that. And what is experiencing that is the life dreamer, or spirit, or Atman, or whatever name you want to give it. And it's got no form, because it's experiencing all form. So within the form, within the dream, within the flow of experience, I'm this fellow Tim, and I can see myself, and I can hear myself as I speak, and I can conscious my thoughts. And I'm Tim, and Tim is, experiencing this particular place on the earth and having these adventures. But the depth of my being is the experiencer, the witness of this. And that, you can't see it, because it has no color. It has no shape. You can't hear it because it makes no noise. But it's conscious of all shape, of all color, of all noise. It's the experiencer. So lucid living, like lucid dreaming, is when you're conscious of both. So lucid dreaming is when you're in your dream and it's going on, and then suddenly you realize, oh, there's more to this than I think. Because really I'm the dreamer. I'm the presence of awareness within which this whole dream is arising. Lucid living is the same but now. You're going along, you're lost in a dream, you're probably so unconscious you haven't even noticed it's a mystery. And then you start waking up, you notice it's a mystery, you go through that, and you become conscious of your deeper nature, and I'm the presence of awareness within which this dream is arising, within which this dream of Tim is arising. And within the dream I'm Tim, and at the deeper level I'm this spacious presence of awareness or spirit.
So as our listeners are dreaming this conversation, which many of them are doing that right now, is there a website they can reach out and find out more about your work?
Yes, definitely, Daniel. And there's lots and lots of free stuff. I want to be able to connect people with these ideas as much as possible. They can find out about the many books I've done, including Lucid Living and the Mystery Experience, which I mentioned. There's lots of videos and downloads and meditations and all of that. And the website is just simply timfreke.com. Now, my name, as you probably noticed but was too polite to say, is a strange one. It's an old-fashioned English name. It's pronounced Freke, which is kind of funny and makes you grow up with a sense of humor, but it's not spelled in the normal way. It's spelled F-R-E-K-E. So if you put in Tim Freke, F-R-E-K-E, into Google, you will find me, and it's timfreke.com. And I hope you'll enjoy coming in, and feel free to send me a message and see what you think.
Exciting stuff here. We're in exciting times, and it's exciting to be alive, and certainly being lucid during that life is something we encourage all of our listeners to do as well. Lucid Living is the book. Experience your life like a lucid dream. Our guest today, Tim Freke. One more time on that website for our listeners.
Yeah, timfreke.com.
Doesn't get any easier than that. Let's go out and enjoy those crazy galaxies. What do you say, Tim?
Yeah, I think so. It's a hell of a ride. Let's enjoy it, and let's enjoy it together, and let's bring some love into the world together. Let's wake up to oneness and bring love into the world, because that feels like that's what doing our best really means.
I completely agree with you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. It's been a real delight.
You betcha. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, as you continue in your lucid living process. You might want to also consider visiting us at beyond50radio.com and get a taste of reality there on our upcoming shows and what we're up to as well. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Beyond 50 Radio. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.